Sarah Martinez had never imagined her college job would lead her into the world of elite military training. At 22, she was just trying to pay her tuition at San Diego State University while studying business administration. The job posting at Naval Base Coronado seemed straightforward enough. Range assistant, reset targets, maintain equipment, assist with basic range operations. It paid better than her previous job at the campus bookstore, and the hours worked around her class schedule. The first day at the shooting range felt overwhelming. The facility stretched across several acres, with multiple shooting lanes extending hundreds of yards into the distance. Steel targets of various shapes and sizes dotted the range at different distances. Some were simple circular plates, others were complex reactive targets that would spin or fall when hit. The constant crack of gunfire echoed across the facility, as various military units conducted their training exercises. Her supervisor, Master Chief Peterson, was a gruff man in his 50s, with weathered hands and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He explained her duties with military precision: reset fallen targets between shooting sessions, replace damaged target faces, ensure the range was clear of debris, and most importantly, follow every safety protocol without exception. "This isn't a game, Martinez," he said, handing her safety glasses and ear protection. "One mistake out here can cost someone their life." The work was physically demanding. Between shooting sessions, Sarah would run out to the target areas, often carrying heavy steel plates or target stands. She learned to move quickly and efficiently, knowing that dozens of highly trained shooters were waiting to continue their practice. The targets took a beating from the constant gunfire. Some days she would find steel plates with holes punched clean through them, testament to the precision and power of the weapons being used. What fascinated Sarah most were the different groups that used the range. Regular Navy personnel came for their quarterly qualifications, shooting at simple paper targets from relatively close distances. Marines arrived with their own intensity, competing with each other even during basic training exercises. But it was the special operations teams that really caught her attention. They moved differently, spoke differently, and their training exercises were unlike anything the regular military units did. The SEAL teams were easy to identify even when they weren't wearing their distinctive uniforms. They carried themselves with quiet confidence, their movements economical and purposeful. Their training scenarios were complex, involving multiple targets at varying distances, simulated stress conditions, and shooting positions that seemed impossible to her untrained eye. She watched them shoot from behind cover while moving, even while hanging upside down from obstacles they had constructed on the range. One particular SEAL team used the range every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Led by a man the others called Chief Rodriguez, the team of 8 operators would arrive before dawn and conduct training that lasted until mid-morning. Unlike other units that might joke around between exercises, this team maintained focus throughout their sessions. Sarah found herself timing her target resets to coincide with their breaks, curious about their techniques and equipment. Their weapons were different too. While most military personnel used standard-issue rifles and pistols, the SEALs carried customized weapons with sophisticated optics, specialized ammunition, and modifications she didn't recognize. Chief Rodriguez carried a rifle that looked like a work of art, every component carefully selected and precisely adjusted. She had never seen anyone shoot with such accuracy at such incredible distances. During her 3rd week on the job, something unusual happened. The SEAL team was conducting a long-range precision exercise, engaging targets at distances that seemed impossible to Sarah's civilian eyes. She was positioned in the target area, having just reset a series of steel plates at the 400-yard line. As she prepared to return to the safety area, she noticed one target at the 500-yard line had malfunctioned. The target's mechanism had jammed when struck, leaving it partially fallen and potentially dangerous for the next shooter. Following protocol, Sarah radioed back to the firing line to report the malfunction. Chief Rodriguez's voice came back immediately, professional but concerned. "Martinez, can you see what's wrong with Target 7? Sarah examined the mechanism carefully. The target was designed to fall completely when struck and then reset automatically, but the impact had bent part of the frame, causing it to hang at an odd angle. "The frame is bent, Chief. It's not falling properly and the reset mechanism is jammed." There was a pause on the radio. Sarah knew the team had traveled from their base specifically for this training session, and mechanical problems could derail their entire schedule. She studied the bent metal, trying to understand how the mechanism was supposed to work. Her father had been a mechanic, and she had inherited his ability to understand how things fit together. "I think I can fix it," she radioed back. "I need to bend this bracket back into position and clear the jam." Another pause. Then Chief Rodriguez's voice, slightly surprised. "You think you can repair it?" Sarah was already working on the problem, using a multi-tool she carried to carefully bend the metal bracket back toward its original position. The mechanism was actually quite simple once she understood how it worked. The impact from the bullet had bent the bracket just enough to prevent the target from falling completely, which in turn prevented the automatic reset function from engaging. "Give me 2 minutes," she replied, focused on her work. She carefully straightened the bracket, testing the target's movement several times to ensure it would fall and reset properly. When she was satisfied with the repair, she moved to a safe distance and radioed back. "Target 7 is operational, Chief." The response from the firing line was immediate. A single shot rang out, and the target fell cleanly, then reset automatically, just as it was designed to do. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction at seeing the mechanism work properly again. When she returned to the firing line, Chief Rodriguez was waiting for her. He was older than she had expected, probably in his late 30s, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent in harsh conditions. But his eyes were intelligent and thoughtful, not just the hard stare she expected from special operations personnel. "That was good work out there," he said simply. Most people would have just called for a maintenance crew. Sarah shrugged, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "My dad's a mechanic. I grew up fixing things." Chief Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "We've been watching you work these past few weeks. You move well out there, and you pay attention to details. That target repair was smart thinking." She wasn't sure how to respond to that. Being noticed by the SEAL team felt both intimidating and oddly flattering. "I just try to do my job well. Most people just try to get by," the chief replied. "There's a difference." As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself taking more pride in her work. She began studying the different types of targets and their mechanisms, learning how to perform basic maintenance and repairs rather than just calling for help when something broke. She timed her movements on the range to be as efficient as possible, knowing that every minute saved meant more training time for the units using the facility. The SEAL team began acknowledging her with brief nods or words of thanks when she completed her work quickly and efficiently. It was a small thing, but it meant something to her. These were men who demanded excellence from themselves and everyone around them, and their approval felt earned rather than given. Master Chief Peterson noticed the change in her performance too. "You're getting good at this job, Martinez," he told her one afternoon. "Most college kids we hire just go through the motions until they graduate. You actually care about doing it right." Sarah realized he was correct. Somewhere along the way, this temporary job had become something more to her. She found herself researching different types of shooting sports and military training methods in her spare time. She watched YouTube videos about marksmanship and range operations, trying to understand the technical aspects of what she was supporting. One morning, Chief Rodriguez approached her with an unusual request. "Martinez, we're conducting a special training exercise next week. We'll need someone reliable to operate the target systems while we're shooting. The regular range staff will be supporting other units. Master Chief Peterson recommended you." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. Operating the target systems during live fire exercises was a significant responsibility. She would need to control multiple target mechanisms remotely, timing their activation and movement according to the training scenario. One mistake could ruin the exercise or, worse, create a dangerous situation. "I've never operated the control systems during a live exercise," she admitted. "Peterson says you understand the mechanisms better than most of his full-time staff, and we've watched you work. You're careful, and you think before you act. Those are the qualities we need." The following week, Sarah found herself in the range control booth, surrounded by monitors and control panels that managed the electronic target systems. Chief Rodriguez and his team were conducting a complex scenario that involved multiple moving targets at various distances, simulated urban obstacles, and time pressure that replicated combat conditions. Her job was to activate targets according to a predetermined sequence, simulating the appearance of threats that the operators would need to engage quickly and accurately. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and the exercise lost its realism. Too late, and the operators would be standing idle, losing the flow of the training scenario. As the exercise began, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Through the monitors, she could see the SEAL team moving through their course, communicating with hand signals and engaging targets with precision that still amazed her. When her cue came, she activated the first series of targets, watching as steel plates popped up at various distances. The sound of suppressed gunfire reached her even through the soundproof booth. One by one, the targets fell as the operators engaged them. Sarah activated the next sequence, then the next, keeping pace with the team's movement through the course. Everything was going perfectly. Then something went wrong. One of the targets malfunctioned, failing to fall when struck. Through the monitors, Sarah could see it was blocking the team's view of the next target in the sequence. The exercise was about to break down, and there was no way to reset the target remotely. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed her radio and headed for the door of the control booth. She had to fix that target, and she had to do it now, while the team was still in the flow of their training scenario. Sarah burst through the door of the control booth and sprinted toward the malfunctioned target. She could hear Chief Rodriguez's voice on the radio, trying to coordinate his team around the obstruction, but she knew the training scenario was falling apart. The jammed target was blocking their line of sight to 3 other targets that were supposed to simulate enemy combatants in a hostage situation. "Control, we need that target down now," came Rodriguez's voice over the radio, tension creeping into his usually calm tone. "Moving to fix it," Sarah replied, already halfway to the target area. What she hadn't fully considered was that she was running directly into an active training exercise. The SEAL team was still engaged in their scenario, and while they used training ammunition in most exercises, the protocols and movements were identical to real combat situations. As she reached the malfunctioned target, she suddenly found herself in the middle of their tactical formation. The target was more severely damaged than she had expected. Instead of a simple mechanical jam, the impact had shattered part of the electronic control mechanism. Fragments of circuit board and twisted metal told the story of a direct hit that had completely destroyed the target's ability to function. She would need to manually lower it and bypass the electronic controls entirely. As she worked, she became aware that the SEAL team had repositioned themselves around her. They hadn't broken character or abandoned their exercise. Instead, they had smoothly adapted their tactics to work around her presence. She could hear their quiet communications as they maintained security while she worked on the target. 6 o'clock clear. Movement left 40 meters. Still have eyes on the objective. The professionalism was remarkable. Here she was, a civilian college student disrupting their training, and they had simply incorporated her presence into their tactical considerations without missing a beat. She found herself moving more deliberately, trying not to interfere with their positioning as she worked on the broken mechanism. The target was more complex than the simpler ones she was used to repairing. This was part of the advanced system designed to simulate multiple threat scenarios, with electronic components that controlled not just the up and down movement, but also lateral motion and variable timing. The bullet impact had severed several crucial connections and cracked the main circuit board. "How long do you need?" Chief Rodriguez's voice came from directly behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. "The electronics are destroyed," she replied, not looking up from her work. "But I can bypass them and make it fall manually. Give me 30 seconds. She located the manual release mechanism, a backup system designed for exactly this type of situation. But reaching it required her to position herself in a way that would put her directly in the line of fire for the next phase of their exercise. She hesitated, suddenly aware of the complexity of the situation. "Chief, when I trip this release, I'll need to be behind cover before you continue. There's no other way to reach the mechanism." Rodriguez moved beside her, studying the target and the surrounding area. His tactical mind was already working through the problem. "Show me what you need to do." Sarah pointed to the release lever, explaining how the manual system worked. Rodriguez nodded, then made a decision that surprised her. "Johnson, bring up the spare weapon," he called to one of his teammates. One of the other SEALs approached, carrying a rifle identical to the ones the team was using for their exercise. It was equipped with the same sophisticated optics and modifications as Rodriguez's weapon, but Sarah could see it was configured with the bright orange training ammunition that indicated safe practice rounds. "Ever fired a rifle before, Martinez?" Rodriguez asked. The question caught her completely off guard. "Just a hunting rifle with my uncle when I was younger. Nothing like this. The principle's the same, but these are precision instruments. If you're going to be in our training area, you might as well understand what we're working with." He took the rifle from Johnson and began explaining its operation. The weapon was heavier than she expected, but balanced in a way that felt natural in her hands. The optics were incredibly sophisticated, with adjustments for range, wind, and even atmospheric conditions that seemed impossibly complex. "It's a custom-built precision rifle," Rodriguez explained, his voice taking on the tone of an instructor. "Every component has been selected and adjusted for accuracy at extreme ranges. The scope can calculate ballistic trajectories automatically, but the shooter still needs to understand the fundamentals." As he spoke, Sarah found herself drawn into the technical details. The rifle was a work of engineering art, with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch and components that cost more than her car. But underneath all the sophisticated equipment, she could recognize the same basic mechanical principles she understood from fixing target mechanisms. "The most important thing is consistency," Rodriguez continued. "Same grip, same sight picture, same breathing pattern every time. The equipment can help with accuracy, but it can't replace proper technique." He guided her through the basic firing position, adjusting her stance and grip with the attention to detail she had come to expect from the SEAL team. His corrections were precise but patient, treating her like a student rather than an obstacle to their training. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Rodriguez paused, considering his answer. "Because you're out here with us, and you need to understand what we're doing, and because you pay attention to details in a way that most people don't. Good marksmanship isn't that different from good mechanical work. It's about precision, consistency, and understanding how systems work." The other team members had formed a protective perimeter around them, maintaining their tactical exercise while Rodriguez conducted this impromptu lesson. Sarah was struck by how smoothly they worked together, each operator knowing his role and responsibilities without needing constant communication. "Let me fix this target first," she said, handing the rifle back. "Then maybe you can show me how to use this properly." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Handle your primary responsibility first. That's exactly the right priority." Sarah quickly triggered the manual release mechanism and ducked behind cover as the target fell into position. The training scenario could continue now, but something had changed. Instead of returning to her control booth, she found herself studying the exercise from a new perspective, trying to understand the tactical principles behind what the SEALs were doing. When the immediate exercise concluded, Rodriguez called a brief break. The team gathered around their equipment, checking ammunition, and making minor adjustments to their weapons. Sarah expected to be dismissed back to her normal duties, but instead, Rodriguez gestured for her to join them. "Martinez fixed that target faster than our usual maintenance crew would have responded," he told his team. "And she understood enough about our exercise to know exactly what needed to be done." The other SEALs looked at her with new interest. These were men who worked with the best equipment and trained with the most skilled operators in the military. Their approval wasn't given lightly. "You want to try some shooting?" asked Johnson, the operator who had brought the spare rifle. "We've got time before the next scenario." Sarah looked around the group, surprised by the invitation. "I don't want to waste your training time." "Teaching someone who pays attention isn't wasted time," Rodriguez replied. "Besides, you're going to be working around these weapons and this equipment. You should understand how they function." For the next hour, Sarah received instruction in precision marksmanship from some of the most skilled shooters in the world. They started with basic positions and breathing techniques, then progressed to understanding the sophisticated optics and range estimation. Each operator contributed something to her education, sharing techniques and insights they had developed through years of training and experience. The rifle felt different in her hands as her understanding grew. What had seemed like an impossibly complex piece of equipment began to make sense as she learned the logic behind each component and adjustment. The scope's reticle wasn't just a crosshair. It was a sophisticated measuring instrument that could provide precise range and windage information when properly understood. "Your groups are getting tighter," observed Rodriguez as they examined her targets. "You're learning to be consistent." Sarah looked at the paper target, surprised by her own improvement. The shots were still scattered compared to what the SEALs could achieve, but there was a clear pattern of increasing accuracy as she applied their instruction. "This is harder than it looks," she admitted. "Everything worth doing is harder than it looks," replied Johnson. "But you're learning fast because you understand how mechanical systems work. Shooting is just another system with inputs and outputs." As the training session progressed, Sarah found herself thinking differently about the range operations she supported. She had always focused on the mechanical aspects of target systems and safety protocols, but now she was beginning to understand the human element. These operators weren't just practicing their accuracy. They were developing the skills that could mean the difference between life and death in real combat situations. "We run this precision course twice a week," Rodriguez told her as they prepared for the next training scenario. "If you're interested in learning more about this, you're welcome to join us when your range duties allow." Sarah was surprised by the invitation, but even more surprised by how much she wanted to accept it. "I'd like that, Chief, but I want to make sure I'm not taking time away from your team's training." "Good training involves working with different people and adapting to changing situations," he replied. "Having a civilian perspective can be valuable for us too." The afternoon's training scenarios became more complex, involving multiple targets at varying ranges and simulated stress conditions designed to test the operator's ability to perform under pressure. Sarah watched from the control booth, but now she understood what she was seeing in a completely different way. When the SEALs moved through their tactical course, she could recognize the principles Rodriguez had taught her about consistency and precision. When they engaged targets at different ranges, she understood the calculations and adjustments they were making with their sophisticated equipment. The entire exercise made sense to her now, in a way it never had before. But more than the technical knowledge, she had gained an appreciation for the level of dedication and professionalism these operators brought to their training. Every detail mattered to them, because they knew that in real situations, small mistakes could have enormous consequences. As the day's training concluded, Rodriguez approached the control booth. "Good work today, Martinez, both on the target repair and on the shooting instruction." "Thank you for taking the time to teach me," Sarah replied. "I had no idea how complex this all was. Most people don't. They see the equipment and think that's what makes the difference. But equipment is just tools. The real skill is in understanding how to use those tools consistently under stress." Sarah nodded, thinking about everything she had learned. "Will you really let me train with your team sometimes?" Rodriguez smiled, the first time she had seen him express anything other than professional seriousness. "We'll see how serious you are about it. This isn't a hobby for us, Martinez. If you want to learn, you'll need to approach it with the same commitment we do." As she watched the SEAL team pack up their equipment and prepare to leave, Sarah realized that her perspective on her job had changed completely. She was no longer just a college student resetting targets to pay tuition. She was supporting training that could save lives, and now she had the opportunity to understand and participate in that training herself. The thought was both exciting and intimidating. She knew that training with the SEALs would demand more from her than anything she had ever attempted, but as she looked at the target she had repaired and thought about the rifle lesson that followed, she realized she was ready for that challenge. 3 months later, Sarah's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. What began as training sessions twice a week with the SEAL team had evolved into something approaching an obsession. She found herself arriving at the range hours before her scheduled work shifts, practicing the fundamentals Rodriguez and his team had taught her. Her textbooks gathered dust while she studied ballistics manuals and marksmanship theory. The improvement in her shooting was dramatic. The scattered shots of her first lesson had given way to consistent groupings that impressed even the experienced operators. But more importantly, she had begun to understand the mental discipline that separated good shooters from exceptional ones. It wasn't just about the technical aspects of rifle operation. It was about developing the ability to perform under pressure, to make precise decisions quickly, and to maintain focus despite distractions. "Your breathing control has improved significantly," Rodriguez noted during one of their training sessions. "But you're still rushing your shots when we add stress factors." They had been conducting exercises designed to simulate the pressure of combat situations. Loud noises, time constraints, and physical exertion were introduced to test Sarah's ability to maintain accuracy under adverse conditions. It was one thing to shoot well from a stable position with unlimited time. It was entirely different to deliver precise shots while exhausted, stressed, and under time pressure. In real situations, you rarely have perfect conditions, explained Johnson as they set up the next drill. You might be shooting after running for miles, or while taking incoming fire, or when you have only seconds to identify and engage a target. Training under stress teaches your body to perform automatically. The drill they were preparing was particularly challenging. Sarah would need to sprint 200 yards, then immediately engage targets at various ranges while her heart rate was elevated and her breathing was labored. The targets were smaller than usual, and the time limit was tight enough that every shot had to count. Remember what we taught you about recovery breathing, Rodriguez reminded her. You can't eliminate the physical stress, but you can learn to work with it instead of fighting it. Sarah nodded, checking her equipment one final time. The rifle that had once felt foreign in her hands now felt like a natural extension of her body. She understood every component, every adjustment, and how each element contributed to accuracy, but understanding the equipment was only part of the challenge. The whistle blew, and Sarah began her sprint. The 200 yards felt much longer when she was carrying a rifle and wearing the protective gear the SEALs had insisted she use during training. By the time she reached the firing position, her heart was pounding, and her breathing was rapid and shallow. The first target appeared at 100 yards. Sarah forced herself to follow the breathing technique Rodriguez had taught her, taking a quick recovery breath before settling into her shooting position. The scope's reticle wavered slightly as she tried to control her elevated heart rate, but she managed to deliver a solid hit to the target's center mass. Target 2 appeared at 300 yards, a much more challenging shot under these conditions. Sarah adjusted her position, applied the range estimation techniques she had learned, and squeezed the trigger smoothly. Another hit, though not as precise as she would have liked under ideal conditions. The remaining targets came in rapid succession, each one testing a different aspect of her training. By the final shot, Sarah was operating almost automatically, her movements controlled by the countless hours of practice rather than conscious thought. When the exercise concluded, she was exhausted but exhilarated. Not bad, Johnson commented as they examined her target scores. Your groups opened up under stress, but you kept all your shots in the effective zone. Rodriguez was more direct in his assessment. Your technical skills are solid, but you're still thinking too much under pressure. Trust your training and let your body do what you've taught it to do. It was feedback Sarah had heard before, but she was beginning to understand what he meant. The SEAL operators moved through their exercises with a fluid confidence that came from thousands of hours of practice. They didn't consciously think about each movement or adjustment. Their training had become instinctive. How long did it take you to develop that kind of automatic response? She asked. Rodriguez considered the question seriously. Years of constant practice. But it's not just about time. It's about the quality of training and the mindset you bring to it. You can practice bad habits for years and never improve, or you can focus on perfection from the beginning and develop good habits that become second nature. That afternoon, Master Chief Peterson approached Sarah with an unusual request. A group of Marine snipers was coming to use the range for a training exercise, and they had specifically requested an experienced range operator who understood precision shooting. Peterson wanted Sarah to support their training. These Marines are some of the best marksmen in the military, Peterson explained. They'll be shooting at extreme ranges with equipment that costs more than most people's houses. They need someone who understands what they're trying to accomplish and can support their training effectively. Sarah felt honored by the assignment but also nervous. Working with the SEAL team had given her confidence in her abilities, but supporting Marine sniper training would be a new challenge entirely. These operators would be shooting at ranges that extended far beyond anything she had experienced, and their requirements for precision would be even more demanding. The Marine sniper team arrived at dawn, bringing equipment that made even the SEALs' sophisticated rifles look simple. Their weapons were massive, purpose-built instruments designed for accuracy at distances measured in miles rather than yards. The scopes alone were marvels of optical engineering, capable of compensating for atmospheric conditions that could affect bullet trajectory over extreme ranges. The team leader, Gunnery Sergeant Williams, was a tall, lean man with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent in harsh conditions. His reputation preceded him. Sarah had heard other range staff mention his name with the kind of respect reserved for legends in their field. "You're the range operator we requested?" Williams asked, studying Sarah with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant." "I'll be supporting your training today." Williams nodded slowly. "I understand you've been training with the SEAL team. Chief Rodriguez speaks highly of your abilities." Sarah was surprised that Rodriguez had mentioned her to the Marine sniper. The Special Operations community was small and tight-knit, but she hadn't expected her training to be noticed outside the SEAL team itself. The Marines' training exercise was unlike anything Sarah had previously supported. They were practicing what they called extreme long-range shooting, engaging targets at distances that seemed impossible. The targets themselves were barely visible even through high-powered spotting scopes, and the environmental factors affecting their shots were complex beyond anything she had imagined. Wind speed and direction at multiple points along the bullet's trajectory had to be calculated and compensated for. Temperature, humidity, and even the rotation of the Earth became factors in their firing solutions. Sarah watched in amazement as the snipers gathered environmental data with sophisticated instruments before making minute adjustments to their rifles. "At these ranges, everything matters," explained Williams as they prepared for the first shot. "A small error in calculation can result in a miss by several feet. That's why we train constantly, and why we need range support that understands what we're trying to accomplish." Sarah's role was more complex than simply resetting targets. The Marines needed real-time feedback on their hits and misses to adjust their firing solutions for follow-up shots. She operated high-powered spotting scopes and electronic target systems that could detect and report impacts with precision measured in fractions of an inch. The first shot of the exercise came from a distance of 1,200 yards. Sarah watched through her spotting scope as the sniper settled into position, his movements deliberate and controlled. The rifle's report was different from the smaller weapons she was accustomed to, a deeper, more authoritative sound that spoke of the massive cartridge being fired. The bullet's flight time at that distance was noticeably longer than anything she had experienced. There was a brief pause after the shot before she saw the impact on the target, a clean hit just inches from the center. She reported the exact impact location to the sniper, who made a minor adjustment before engaging the next target. As the exercise progressed, Sarah found herself drawn into the technical aspects of extreme long-range shooting. The calculations required were fascinating, involving physics principles she recognized from her engineering classes. But seeing those principles applied in real time, with life-and-death precision, made the theory come alive in a way no textbook ever could. "You're asking good questions," Williams observed during a break in the training. "Most range operators just do their job and don't try to understand what we're doing. You seem genuinely interested in the technical aspects. It's incredible how many factors you have to consider," Sarah replied. "I had no idea shooting at these distances was so complex." Williams smiled, the first time she had seen him express anything other than professional focus. "Most people think snipers just point and shoot. In reality, we're applied physicists who happen to use rifles as our instruments. Would you like to try a shot?" The offer surprised Sarah even more than Rodriguez's initial invitation to train with the SEALs. These were Marines conducting serious training with weapons worth more than she made in a year. The idea of being allowed to fire one of their precision rifles seemed almost surreal. "I don't want to waste your training time or ammunition," she said. "Good training often involves working with different shooters and different perspectives," Williams replied, echoing something Rodriguez had told her months earlier. "Besides, Chief Rodriguez told me you've developed into quite a marksman. I'm curious to see what you can do with proper equipment." The rifle Williams handed her was unlike anything she had ever held. It was heavier than the weapons she was accustomed to, but balanced in a way that made it feel stable and controlled. The scope was a marvel of optical engineering, with adjustments and features she had never seen before. Williams walked her through the basic operation of the rifle and scope, explaining the ballistic computer that could calculate trajectory automatically based on environmental inputs. But even with all the sophisticated technology, the fundamentals remained the same: consistent position, controlled breathing, and smooth trigger control. The target was set at 800 yards, closer than the Marines had been shooting, but still beyond anything Sarah had attempted before. Through the scope, the target looked impossibly small, and she found herself wondering how anyone could hit something so distant with consistent accuracy. Don't overthink it, Williams advised. Trust the equipment and apply the fundamentals you've learned. The principles don't change just because the distance is greater. Sarah settled into the shooting position Williams had shown her, trying to apply everything she had learned from months of training with the SEALs. The rifle felt solid and stable, and the scope's reticle seemed to settle naturally on the target. She controlled her breathing, applied steady pressure to the trigger, and fired. The shot surprised her with its recoil, significantly more powerful than the weapons she was used to. But through the scope, she could see the result. A clean hit just outside the target's center ring. At 800 yards, with equipment she had never used before, she had delivered an effective shot. The Marines gathered around to examine the target through their spotting scopes, their expressions showing professional interest rather than mere politeness. For operators accustomed to extraordinary precision, Sarah's shot represented solid marksmanship under challenging conditions. "That's impressive for your first attempt at this range," Williams said. "Your fundamentals are sound, and you adapted well to the different equipment. With more practice, you could develop into a serious long-range shooter." As the day's training continued, Sarah found herself thinking about the path that had brought her to this moment. 6 months earlier, she had been just another college student working a part-time job to pay tuition. Now she was supporting elite military training and developing skills she had never imagined pursuing. But more than the technical abilities, she had discovered something about herself. The discipline and precision required for this level of marksmanship appealed to her in a way that surprised her. The challenge of constant improvement, the satisfaction of performing under pressure, and the camaraderie of working with dedicated professionals had become important parts of her life. When the Marines concluded their training, Williams approached her with an unexpected offer. "We conduct advanced marksmanship courses for military and law enforcement personnel. If you're ever interested in pursuing this more seriously, I think you'd do well in our program." Sarah thanked him for the offer, but as she watched the sniper team pack their sophisticated equipment, she found herself wondering what pursuing marksmanship more seriously would mean for her future. She was already spending more time on the range than in her college classes, and her academic performance was beginning to reflect her divided attention. That evening, Rodriguez found her in the control booth, updating the day's training records and maintenance logs. "I heard the Marines were impressed with your shooting today." "Gunnery Sergeant Williams was very patient with me," Sarah replied. "I had no idea how complex long-range shooting could be." Rodriguez sat down across from her, his expression more serious than usual. "Williams doesn't offer training opportunities to just anyone. He sees potential in you that goes beyond hobby shooting." Sarah looked up from her paperwork, sensing that this conversation was heading somewhere important. "What are you saying, Chief?" "I'm saying you've reached the point where you need to make some decisions about where you want this training to lead. You've got natural ability and the discipline to develop it, but that's only valuable if you have clear goals." It was a question Sarah had been avoiding, but she knew Rodriguez was right. Her casual interest in marksmanship had evolved into something much more serious, and she couldn't continue indefinitely without deciding what she wanted to accomplish. "What would you do in my position?" she asked. Rodriguez smiled slightly. "I'd figure out what I really wanted to achieve, then commit to it completely. Half measures don't work in this field, Martinez. Excellence requires total dedication." 6 months after her conversation with Rodriguez about commitment and goals, Sarah found herself facing the most challenging decision of her life. She had dropped out of college, a choice that horrified her parents but felt inevitable given her complete absorption in marksmanship training. The part-time job at the shooting range had become full-time employment as Master Chief Peterson recognized her expertise and promoted her to lead range operations specialist. But it was the letter in her hands that represented the real crossroads. The Marine Corps had offered her a contract as a civilian marksmanship instructor, working with their sniper training program. Gunnery Sergeant Williams had been serious about his offer, and her performance during several advanced training courses had impressed his superiors enough to create a formal position. The opportunity was unprecedented. She would be one of the few civilian instructors working directly with military snipers, teaching the same precision shooting techniques she had spent months mastering. The pay was excellent, the training opportunities were unlimited, and she would be working with the most skilled marksmen in the world. But accepting the position would mean leaving Coronado, leaving the SEAL team that had become her mentors and friends, and committing to a career path she had never planned or imagined. It would also mean acknowledging that her life had changed completely from the college student who had simply needed a part-time job to pay tuition. "You look like someone wrestling with a big decision," Chief Rodriguez observed, finding her sitting alone on the range after the day's training had concluded. Sarah showed him the letter. Rodriguez read it carefully, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. When he finished, he handed it back without comment, waiting for her to speak first. "They want an answer by Friday," she said. "That's 3 days. What's holding you back?" Sarah had been asking herself the same question. The logical answer was fear of the unknown, concern about leaving behind everything familiar for a career she had never planned. But the deeper truth was more complex. "This all started by accident," she said finally. "I never intended to become a marksman. I just wanted to pay for college and graduate with a business degree. Now I'm being offered a chance to make shooting my career, and I don't know if I'm good enough to deserve it." Rodriguez nodded slowly. Imposter syndrome. Every professional goes through it at some point. The question isn't whether you deserve the opportunity, it's whether you're willing to do whatever it takes to excel at it. Before Sarah could respond, the radio crackled with an emergency transmission. "All stations, we have a medical emergency on Range 7. Emergency medical is en route, but we need immediate assistance with crowd control and range safety." Rodriguez and Sarah both headed toward Range 7 immediately. As they arrived, the situation became clear. A visiting law enforcement SWAT team was conducting training when one of their officers had suffered what appeared to be a heart attack. The man was conscious but in distress, and the emergency medical team was still several minutes away. The problem was that the officer had collapsed in an exposed position on the range, and the ongoing training exercise had left other officers positioned throughout the course. In the confusion and concern for their teammate, some of the SWAT officers had moved into positions that created dangerous crossfire situations. "We need to clear this range safely before the medics arrive," Rodriguez said, immediately taking charge of the situation. Too many people moving around without coordination. The SWAT team leader was trying to manage both the medical emergency and the safety concerns, but the stress of the situation was causing communication breakdowns. Several officers were trying to reach their collapsed teammates simultaneously, creating a chaotic and potentially dangerous situation. "Martinez, take the north end and get those 3 officers behind safe cover," Rodriguez ordered. "I'll handle the south side." Sarah moved quickly toward the officers Rodriguez had indicated. They were well-trained law enforcement personnel, but the medical emergency had disrupted their normal protocols. She needed to get them organized and moving safely without adding to the chaos. "Officers, I need you to move to the safe area behind the concrete barriers," she called out, using the authoritative voice she had learned from months of range operations. "Medical personnel will need clear access to your teammate." The officers looked at her with some confusion. She was clearly civilian, young, and not part of their chain of command. Under normal circumstances, they might have questioned her authority to give them directions. But there was something in her manner that conveyed competence and urgency without panic. The same calm focus she had developed for precision shooting served her well in this crisis situation. The officers responded to her directions, moving quickly to secure positions that would allow emergency medical personnel clear access. As the emergency medical team arrived and began treating the injured officer, Sarah found herself coordinating the overall range safety, while Rodriguez worked directly with the SWAT team leader to account for all personnel and weapons. It was a complex situation involving multiple agencies, various levels of authority, and equipment scattered throughout the range. The injured officer was stabilized and transported to the hospital, but the incident had left equipment and personnel distributed across a wide area that needed to be systematically cleared and secured. Sarah worked methodically through the range, checking each position and ensuring that all weapons were properly cleared and accounted for. "Good work out there," the SWAT team leader told her as they completed the equipment accountability. "You kept your head when things got chaotic. That's not as common as it should be." As the various agencies cleared the range and normal operations resumed, Rodriguez approached Sarah with an observation that surprised her. "You handled that situation like someone with years of experience," he said. "Most people would have been overwhelmed by the complexity and stress." Sarah realized he was right. During the emergency, she hadn't felt overwhelmed or uncertain. The same mental discipline she had developed for precision shooting had automatically applied to the crisis situation. She had assessed the problem systematically, prioritized the most critical issues, and executed solutions methodically. "I just focused on what needed to be done," she replied. "That's exactly what I mean," Rodriguez said. "You've developed the ability to think clearly under pressure and execute complex tasks precisely. Those aren't common skills, Martinez." That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment staring at the Marine Corps letter, but her perspective had changed. The day's emergency had shown her something about herself that she hadn't recognized before. The skills she had developed through marksmanship training extended far beyond shooting accuracy. The mental discipline, the ability to perform under pressure, the systematic approach to complex problems, and the calm focus required for precision shooting had become part of her character. These were valuable professional skills regardless of the specific career path she chose. But more importantly, she had discovered that she was genuinely good at this work. Not just the shooting, but the entire complex environment of training, support, safety management, and working with highly skilled professionals under demanding conditions. The next morning, Rodriguez found her at the range earlier than usual, practicing the fundamentals with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. "Have you made your decision about the Marine position?" he asked. "I think so," Sarah replied, lowering her rifle. "But I want to ask you something first. Do you think I'm good enough to succeed at that level?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, watching as she methodically cleaned and checked her equipment with the attention to detail he had taught her months earlier. "I think you're asking the wrong question," he said finally. "The real question is whether you want it badly enough to do whatever it takes to excel. Natural ability and good training will only take you so far. Excellence requires something more." "What do you mean?" "I mean the willingness to push yourself beyond what you think you're capable of, to maintain your standards even when it's difficult, and to never stop learning and improving. The Marines aren't just offering you a job, Martinez. They're offering you the chance to be among the best in the world at what you do." Sarah nodded slowly. She understood what he was saying, and she realized that she did want that level of excellence. The accidental discovery of her aptitude for precision shooting had revealed something deeper about her character and aspirations. "Chief, can I ask you one more thing?" "Of course. When you decided to become a SEAL, were you certain you were making the right choice?" Rodriguez smiled. "I was terrified I wasn't good enough and excited about the possibility of becoming something I'd never imagined. That combination of fear and excitement usually means you're heading in the right direction." That afternoon, Sarah called the Marine Corps recruiter and accepted their offer. As she hung up the phone, she felt the same combination of fear and excitement Rodriguez had described. She was committing to a path she had never planned, pursuing excellence in a field she had discovered by accident, but it no longer felt like an accident. The months of training, the gradual development of skills and confidence, and the relationships she had built with some of the most professional people she had ever met had all led to this moment. 2 weeks later, on her last day at the Coronado Range, the SEAL team gathered for a final training session. Rodriguez presented her with a gift that left her speechless, a precision rifle configured specifically for her build and shooting style, with custom optics and modifications based on everything they had learned about her preferences and techniques during their months of training together. "Every professional needs proper tools," he said simply. "This rifle is built to the same specifications we use, but customized for you. Take care of it, and it will take care of you." As Sarah prepared to leave for her new assignment, Rodriguez offered one final piece of advice. "Remember what we taught you about consistency and fundamentals. They apply to everything, not just shooting. Show up on time, do your best work every day, and never stop learning. The specific skills will continue to develop, but your character and work ethic are what will determine how far you go." The SEAL team was conducting a special training exercise that involved working with civilian contractors on a complex long-range shooting scenario. They had specifically requested her as their technical consultant and instructor. The letter ended with a line that made her smile. "We need someone who understands precision and can work under pressure. Thought you might be available." As she prepared for the assignment, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had started as a college student who just needed a part-time job, discovered an unexpected aptitude for precision shooting, and developed that aptitude into professional expertise through dedication and excellent instruction. But more than the technical skills, she had learned something about the pursuit of excellence itself. The discipline required for precision shooting had become a template for approaching every challenge in her life. The same principles that produced accuracy at extreme ranges also produced success in complex professional situations. The accidental discovery of her marksmanship abilities had revealed something deeper about her potential and her character. She had learned that excellence in any field required the same fundamental qualities: attention to detail, willingness to practice consistently, ability to perform under pressure, and the humility to continue learning from the best instructors available. As she packed her gear for the assignment with Rodriguez's team, Sarah smiled at the irony. She was returning to where her journey had started, but now as an expert in her field rather than a student. The college student who had simply needed to pay tuition had become a professional who was sought out by the same elite operators who had originally taught her. The rifle Rodriguez had given her was packed carefully in its custom case, along with the medals and certificates she had earned during her training with the Marines. But the most valuable thing she carried was the knowledge that she had discovered and developed her potential completely, transforming an accidental aptitude into professional excellence through dedication and the guidance of exceptional mentors. When Chief Rodriguez had handed her his rifle that first day and stepped back to let her learn, neither of them could have imagined where that moment of trust would lead. But Sarah now understood that the most important discoveries often begin with someone believing in potential that hasn't been fully recognized yet, and having the courage to pursue that potential wherever it might lead.